So, welcome to From Zero to 3 Million Views, building a multi-account UGC engine that converts with Andi Bucescu. We're very excited to have her here with us, excited that you are here with us too. So, this is the team, this is the Leo team here. We have Connor, Josh, Brandon, Taylor, myself, and Spencer. Taylor's not in the call today, but if you have any specific questions for any of them, I don't know why you would, but you might. You can drop those in the chat. Um, but most importantly, we have Andi here as well. And it is, whoops, I don't know if you can still see my screen. I hope you can. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce her. She is the head of marketing at Rosebud AI, which is a very cool company, with a very cool product. It allows you to vibe code video games. So she's working there at the intersection of AI and brand storytelling. She graduated from Minerva University in San Francisco with a degree in business and brand management. Before working in gamer tech at Rosebud, she worked in ed tech and fintech. And she's worked on various marketing projects all around the world with important social missions in South Korea, Taiwan, Romania, the UK, Argentina, New York City, and San Francisco. So she's been all over, and those are just the places that she has disclosed on her LinkedIn. So who knows where else she's been? Um, Andi, thank you so much for being here. Oh, I should note that it also says in her LinkedIn bio that when she's not working, she is hiking, traveling, or practicing aerial yoga, which I had to look up to know what that was. And it seems to be a cross between yoga and trapeze. It looks very difficult, so that's very cool. Um, but again, thank you for being here, Andi. We're very excited to learn from you and benefit from your experience and expertise. And with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for that thorough intro. I'm super happy to answer any questions about aerial yoga in the Q&A after this. That's something I picked up when I was in one of my, travel adventures. I'm going to share a presentation just to kind of serve as reference for what I'm talking about. But I feel like you've set the floor pretty clearly in terms of we're going to discuss what UGC means, how to get it started, and how to actually make sure it works really well. Um, I had a little slide here with my headshot, but we know everything about me except for my blood type, which I don't know myself. And then we'll just jump right in. Hopefully, by the end of this session, you'll have a better understanding of the ways in which this can be approached, how this framework can be translated to different companies and different niches. Obviously, I've been running this for Rosebud for a couple of months now, and that's a very interesting product space. It's direct to consumer, it's a creative tool, so it is kind of a unique positioning in that sense, but that is not to say that something like UGC can't work for B2B SaaS or it can't work for something that's not typically used on TikTok. So that's kind of my goal is to give you a framework that you can take away and repackage to apply to any sort of business niche. First of all, what is UGC and why should you care? So I added in a couple of screenshots here in terms of what a UGC account or strategy would look like when it's being sold to you. UGC is user-generated content, and it initially emerged as companies, big brands, imagine like a makeup brand or an activewear brand, being so good that somebody buys from them, spends their money on them, and then goes and posts about it online for free because they're so proud to use their product. So that is a user-generated piece of content. However, brands quickly caught on that, oh, maybe we can engineer this. Maybe we can gift people stuff and they'll post about it. Maybe we can give them rewards for posting about our product. And this was really valuable for them to start off with, simply because that generates so much trust when somebody from your inner circle recommends you something. I actually saw a meme saying that a girl sharing something with her inner circle is like 10 times more powerful than any influencer campaign you could ever run. So that's kind of where UGC initially was seated. In 2026, that looks a lot more different. There's now marketplaces where you can hire creators who are here to do side hustles and who are here to help you farm views on TikTok. There's businesses that are well known for blowing up online and that being their main marketing strategy. That's why the Cluey logo is here. I'm sure we've all heard of their case study. And there's companies running all of these in-house creator programs. There's companies hiring agencies for this. And yet nobody really is sharing a playbook that actually works. So hopefully, I mean, I do think there is a lot of reason to it, and we'll get into that, but hopefully this playbook will actually be helpful at the end. The thing about UGC is it's organic-ish. So, like I said, it's organic in the sense that, in essence, it's meant to be a trusted recommendation, but it's not so trusted these days because it can be faked so easily, and people are now paying for it. So that kind of takes away the whole like free publicity part of it. Um, the good thing about it is that if you're able to package it in a trusted way, it still works. If you're not, you get a lot of empty hype and you drain it a lot of money, putting it into representatives, paying for empty metrics. And I have a good slide for that next. Um, I've recently been offered 700,000 views across 150 creators in 30 days. Now, that sounds pretty cool when you first read it. You're almost at a million. You're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be all over the internet. So many people posting. And no shade to the specific creator, but a lot of UGC accounts that go into this metric look like this, which is 50 views, 2 views, very, very small numbers. And the power that they recommend is in the volume of 150 creators posting every day. So if you actually divide the 700,000 by 150 and then by 30 again, you're somewhere at like 150 views per post. And that is where UGC, a lot of these volume focused UGC content pieces land. It's nobody ends up really seeing them. It's usually the same 2, 3 people who are close friends of the account that see them, and it doesn't really convert. How to go around these inflated metrics, I wonder, and how to actually be able to reach metrics engagement that is actually meaningful. At the end of this, I'll talk about like what we did, but this is kind of a framework that I want to set before that. There's kind of 3 things that you actually want to understand. You have to doom scroll. Like there's no way to go around this. And people are building AI products that will tell you that they're online instead of you, and they give you briefs, which works to some extent. But if you don't actually understand how people talk to each other on a specific social media platform, whether that's TikTok, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's Twitter or X, you're never going to be able to evaluate very, very well whether a piece of content would actually resonate on that platform. So the doom scrolling, it doesn't mean you have to be online 6 hours a day, but you should be able to really understand whether this post on this specific platform looks like it was written by a person or whether it looks like it was written by AI, whether it's something that would catch your eye, and so on. You have to kind of be native to that platform, and that's a matter of training. In terms of thinking content and especially casual content, which is the second bullet point, you kind of have to think about how would your company or your product be mentioned in a casual conversation. So once you understand how people are talking on that platform, how can you package your brand so that it would be raised casually in that conversation? You can't just go like, oh, hey guys, I've been working out lately and this is, I love Equinox. You'd probably go in and be like, oh, any like nice gym recommendations? I've heard this and that. I can't believe like whatever Equinox has this offer and so on. So it's usually people don't go on a platform to just talk about a product. They're not that kind of strong evangelists. And what you have to do is nurture a conversation around basically your customer persona. And that leads me to your third point, which is you have to have a really strong idea of who the people are that you're actually trying to talk to and you're actually trying to target. I spent my whole senior year researching social media, what makes great short form video content versus good short form video content and what's that extra level. And one of the most helpful tips I came across was to think about your ICP not as a demographic. If you can, don't think about demographics at all. Nobody cares about their age, nobody cares about their race or their location even. People care about their interests because usually interest-driven demographic or interest-driven customer personas are so much more powerful. You're able to understand the networks they're in, the kind of content they're seeing, and therefore you're able to speak to them more accurately. An example of that for me was I recently started doing content on that for Reddit for Rosebud, and we've been thinking about where do people who work in AI or like have an interest in game development come together. And there's some obvious answers to that. There's obviously like indie development threads, there's gaming, AI gaming threads. But what could be cooler is to cast a broader net and look at specific popular games that people played, say, 20 years ago. Well, those are the people that now have a lot more free time and a lot more disposable income to come together and maybe make their own games. And then cast a broader net in terms of their interests. So once you're able to do that, you're able to find the channels in which they interact. And these three all kind of come together and help you have a good idea of how to speak to them. I don't know how I added these animations to the slides, by the way. So every time I flick between them, it takes an extra half second. I'm not sure how that happened, but thanks for bearing with it. Now, the second point that I wanted to get to is be willing to try and fail. Um, you're not going to get UGC right upon first try. If you do, that's great. And you should take that to like the grave with you, be super proud of it. Um, what you should be thinking about is how do I volume test, but actually have a good hypothesis of value? A lot of people who are trying to establish big UGC strategies these days are just betting on numbers. They're simply betting on if I get 100,000 pieces of content out there, one of them is going to go viral, and that will be my lifeline throughout this whole strategy. In reality, it's a lot more complex than that, and you have to actually think about what are those 100,000 pieces that you put out there, because you could easily put out 100,000 pieces of garbage, and then that incredibly reduces your chances of going viral or, blowing up to any extent. What you have to think of, or what I like to think of, is how to fail fast. So if I have a hypothesis of an angle that's going to work, I try to test it with a maximum of 5 content pieces. And if I don't get positive feedback from it, and I don't get a hunch that there must be something great under here and this could take off, then I stop. And you have to ruthlessly stop and try new ideas until something lands. That's kind of how to tr fail fast rather than push out 100,000 pieces of the same thing. When you know if there's something there is somewhat more product specific, and that's where your expertise as con like industry experts comes in, as your niche and stuff comes in. So for us in game development, what we're looking at, for example, right now, we're trying a strategy of posting day one, day two, day three of making my game. And we know that it resonates not when it just gets views, but when people are commenting and they're like, oh, this game's gonna be fire. Like, I can't wait for this to be released. It's going to be so great. And it's actually people genuinely engaging with your passion, your conversation, giving you feedback rather than just empty likes or empty views. That's usually where we know there's kind of value in an audience. When I get to a case study, I'll tell you a bit more about where else we've seen values. And then how to decide where to start. I mean, that's a question of taste a little bit and a question of reasoning. So I definitely wouldn't only rely on an AI generated list to tell you what content pieces are going to land. That doesn't usually work. But you should have a pretty good idea once you've done your research, you've done your scrolling, and you've kind of understood the people you're talking to. Now here's two accounts that I'm really proud of that we ran with Rosebud. And these accounts are consistently going viral in terms of they're reaching tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Um, and these are the two that kind of accumulated in my 3 million metrics. So the pinned ones here are more recent ones on the left, but if you do a scroll, I'm sure you'll see more videos. And kind of the approach to them was very different between the two. The first one is a lot more product centric, and the other one is more experience centric. And this is a good distinction between what actually converts and what doesn't. So, this is stuff that we've learned along the way. The account on the left literally just shows a game that we made, and it's always like a captivating scene. It's somebody asking you to dance, it's somebody like deciding who to go on a date with, and stuff like that. So, it is obviously a very like romance-centric niche. But it's an account that immediately has a call to action. People want to play this game and people engage in the comments. They're like, where do I find this? How do I go for this? How do I become part of this story? And so we found that this one converts like crazy. We usually don't even put out the link to the games in the comments, or sorry, in the caption or in the video. It's people asking for it organically, people coming back and reporting, oh, I played the game, it was great, I want more episodes, and so on. So it's a format that we kind of figured out that can be repeated very easily. Now, on the right here, this is great for volume, and this is what we see from a lot of other UGC strategies these days. They're funny little anecdotes. A lot of these are 100% real. By the way, I did make all my male engineer colleagues play test all these romance games that you see on the left. It was a very fun experience. But this doesn't ultimately make people be like, oh, I wonder what the product is. I wonder how can I play this. We did get some engagement on that, but it didn't actually bring in nearly as much traffic as the actual game targeted UGC content. The case with this was to find niches where people actually want to come in and have a conversation with you. And then if you're able to build an audience around that, they'll probably come back to you and they'll probably be interested to hear more and ultimately listen over and over again and ultimately take your recommendations. That is a very long form strategy, the stuff that we're doing on the right. The stuff that we're doing on the left is very quick and very rewarding in a couple of days. So when you're approaching UGC accounts, I think that will be a huge learning for anyone is to not just chase empty virality or empty engagement. This was one of my most engaged videos. I think Microsoft commented on it from like two accounts and they were like, you've unlocked a unique experience. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm actually bringing in conversion to the platform. It just means that I can go to sleep at night thinking a lot of people think I'm funny. Um, so what to actually aim for given these? My number one recommendation is to find a repeatable format. What works over and over. And if you go back to these accounts, you see that this is a very simple, repeatable format. It takes literally 30 seconds to film it. You're just playing one scene on your computer and adding some text on. Same with this one. It's literally almost zero movement and adding some text on. And it always works because you're really, I'm going to go on a bit of a research rant here, but you're building this pattern in your viewer's brain, where if they see a specific format, they learn to trust it the more they see it. So if it works the first time, you should be able to replicate it over and over again and catch the same attention. And this is just a thing that your brain does subconsciously. Now, once you find a repeatable format, it becomes much easier to automate this. And this is where a lot of the modern day AI tools come in. So if you have something that can be repeated over and over again, you can easily generate tweaks to the hooks and kind of post the same thing. You can easily generate alternative visuals. They don't all have to have my face in. They could have 10 accounts with 10 different AI generated influencers, for example. saying the same story or saying a similar story as long as people are still paying attention. And that's been tested through the previous account or the previous successes. The second tip is what I already shared, whether you want to reach or whether you want to reach conversion. So what are you optimizing for? I've actually seen UGC accounts where they go on a crazy tangent just to kind of get you hooked in and locked in and then paying attention to some extent to the product. Does that convert the best, or does a very effective product showcase convert the best is a different question. And that's where you should figure out whether you just want views or whether you want actual people through the funnel. The answer is always a little bit of both, but you can figure out what your priorities are to start off with and to train these early muscles. Um, for the account that I mentioned, in terms of trying for reach over conversion, I'll give you this example because it's just hilarious to me. It's a girl that talks about having gone to Disneyland with her boyfriend and her family, or her friends. And she's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea he was a Disney adult. He bought me an engagement ring that looks like Mickey Mouse." And like she posted a photo with like a Mickey Mouse shaped diamond and everything. She's like, "You won't believe how I found this." And she goes on this whole rant about being at the airport and like having to take out like specific toiletries from her bag and how she was nervous about like a toiletry in her bag. And then she finds the ring and then she goes back and finds it. And then she has like a four episode series about whether her boyfriend proposed or not with the Mickey Mouse ring. Then I go on her profile and the caption is like, "For anyone asking about this specific toiletry, here's the link." And that's the only thing in her Instagram caption. And I was like, "Oh my God, this whole story was a front to sell me the freaking shampoo or whatever she's mentioning in the video." And if you go back, her next video is about a new boyfriend that's proposing to her or something. So it's never really, she either has a very volatile relationship or all of that is made up just for the engagement from the viewers and for the selling of the shampoo. But it was hilarious to me to see how you can actually get crazy reach, but I'm not sure how well it converts. Um, Millions of views again. And then ultimately, the last thing is scale doesn't necessarily equal you have to pay for it, especially in the beginning. I would only boost what works, and that's kind of what worked for us before. Once we found a winning format for videos that performs well organically, we were able to put paid spend behind it and then convert a lot more people to the game at scale at very low cost per conversion and cost per click, simply because we already knew what winning formats work for an ad. So I know we're jumping into a Q&A, but I think this is a great segue for Leo as well. And to talk about what you guys do in terms of paid ads and strategies and managing that. I do think that that's what paid off for us in terms of first building out an organic pipeline that works, and then ultimately going into paid with something that we're fully confident in and we're fully worth betting on, especially for small companies that may not have huge confidence in spend budgets or any sort of that flexibility. This, like a UGC pipeline, can value so much more than just a couple of viral hits on TikTok, is my opinion on this. And with that, I will say thank you. I'm open to answering any questions, but otherwise, I do appreciate you listening to my little rant.
That was awesome, Andy. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
of
learned
course.
a ton there. I'm very excited to apply what I've learned in Leo's own social media efforts. Um, so let's jump into the Q&A here. Okay, so go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. Okay, here's our first question from Brandon. He says, "What is your threshold for organic success before starting on paid ads? What do you feel like you have to learn?"
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I've once our founder spewed such wisdom in a response to that, that I can't stop thinking about it. And it usually was that when you hit, it was in relation to hitting PMF as a startup, but I think it translates very well to content as well. And she said that when you hit PMF, you just know because the Stripe checks start rolling in, everyone's subscribing all of a sudden, and your phone just like kind of blows up, it keeps buzzing, and you just see a huge signal that's undeniable. You usually don't get that feeling when you're optimizing for 1% better. So that's kind of what we approach everything with. And in the startup scene, especially email metrics, like if I'm optimizing a 1 CTR, 1% CTR to like a 2% CTR, I'm doing marginal improvements, which of course pay off if you're doing things at scale. But when you're looking at organic content performing, you just know when something's performing. As a benchmark, though, just to give you sort of an idea, we've seen success with brand new accounts. So, like you've seen, we don't have a lot of followers, but the content goes incredibly viral. Um, Usually for a new account with sub 100, sub 1,000 followers, if you're able to get thousands of views on a video, tens of thousands occasionally, hundreds of thousands even occasionally, at that point you know that you have a huge engine working for you. Um, Usually once you make like a breakthrough in terms of how big of a scale your average views are versus your most recent win, that's probably a good point to start exploring putting spend behind it, boosting things, and then learning from that experience.
Awesome. 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 Okay, our next question says, loved the tip about ignoring demographics and focusing on interests for short form content. Are there any tips for getting inside your ICP's head, mapping out what they're interested in, and figuring out how to engage them?
Yeah. Any tips? I think there's some ICPs that are easier to understand than others. For me, it was obviously much easier to understand what a girl who's scrolling on TikTok and would play our romance games would generally see compared to what a gamer dude is doing. However, you can and you should understand all of these ICP interest buckets. I think what helped for me was to like I have like 4 phones on my desk right now, and that's for the multiple TikTok accounts I'm running. But what I normally do is I actually when I start a new account is I scroll as if I'm that person. And that usually helps train my algorithm and show me more of the relevant stuff that somebody in my ideal niche would want to see. Now, this works very well for all sorts of social media. Again, probably X is another good one where you can really quickly train your algorithm to show you relevant stuff. Outside of that, it's maybe what I would suggest is find a couple of really good examples and thought leaders in that niche. So for us, say for gaming, we could look at Poke Games who have a very well-trained player platform. Um, in marketing, I would look at marketers on LinkedIn posting a lot about what they see, what they learn, what they observe, and how they do it. And once you start following a couple of these leading voices, you see how they show up online, how they interact with each other, and who else listens to them, how do they engage with them. And that will give you a much better understanding of the whole ecosystem. It takes a little bit of time, but I do think you can find some sort of very deep insights within a day about each ICP showing up online, depending on how deep you want to go.
That's super interesting. I didn't realize it was that much of a psychological study to get a grasp on your ICP. That's crazy.
Some things you
Yeah.
just feel, but some things
Yeah.
are worth the psychological deep dive.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Connor, I guess we got to buy 4 more phones for our strategy here. So sorry, I don't make the rules. That's per Andy's recommendation. We're gonna do one more question. Something I'm very curious about. we've seen AI UGC become a thing now. As far as authenticity goes, where do you see the future of UGC landing?
Hmm. I actually, I think it's not going to be what we know it for to be today. We see a lot of, like you said, AI UGC, um, being posted everywhere, and everyone's like, you can go mega viral with these hooks and like all of these people, and all of them recommending the same thing. But ultimately, it gets repeatable. And when I scroll on social media in my free time, I don't actually see any of those posts. So I don't actually, or I'm very sensitive to also realizing when something's an ad versus it's not an ad. Um, I think where UGC is headed is something much more micro community oriented. And the way to incentivize that is probably not by paying for each post. It's kind of going back to the basics of giving out free trials and getting people to recommend them, having your own like internal user championship program. Outside of that, it's probably hitting in-house creatorship. And I think that's the direction it's going into. A lot of big brands are now hiring in-house creators to build their own brands within a company. And we're seeing more and more case studies of, I think Home Depot had somebody and Starbucks has somebody. And like a lot of these big brands have an in-house person documenting processes, documenting what they do and creating content through that, through this internal lens. It doesn't have to be about your work, it can be about anything, but it should be someone who's fully dedicated to working with the brand and who's fully dedicated to growing a presence that ultimately leads back to the brand. I think having these in-house creators versus external AI bots or AI driven platforms that connect you with creators on a surface level ultimately delivers so much more value because they're able to learn about the ecosystem and absorb all of this subjective information that I try to explain through psychological research as well. And then once they have that insight, they can delegate it to AI, and that will be great because then you're able to do more. But I think we're looking at championing people with long-term platforms rather than quick virality.
Awesome. Thank
Nice.
you so much for joining us, Andy. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. Um, and thank you all for watching. We'll
Yeah,
see
thank
you in
you.
the next one.
Thank you so much.